Om Niranjanam Nityam Anantarupam Bhaktanukampa Dhritavigraham Vai Ishavataram Parameshamidyam Tang Ramakrishnam Shirasa Namama Jananim Saradam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagatgurum Padapadme Tayo Srutva Pranamami Muhurmuhu Namasri Yatirajaya Vivekananda Surai Satchid Sukhaswarupaya Swami Tapaharini. So the last week was the Easter weekend, so we didn't have the class. And before that, we were discussing some aspect before we started our class, that some questions were raised by some of our listeners, that again and again we go on saying that God has created us in such a way that we are bound to be empathetic. We are bound to love others. And now we find in this life that love do entail a lot of suffering. And naturally, obviously the question comes, are we just like machines? But we are bound to love as God has programmed us in that way? Is there no other way? That sometimes that love, though it entails suffering, as if I have nothing to do. And that speaks of as if a creation where everything has been pre-planned, pre-programmed as per the dictums of God, and we are as if bound to suffer. So is everything predestined? Are we bound to suffer? That speaks of God which is not kind, as if he is cruel. So these doubts have arisen in some of our listeners. And they were asking some questions for some explanation in this regard. So today, that apart from our regular text, we will just go to a bit deeper discussion to understand the way the universe, the plan of God. We can never understand the plan of God. But as per the scriptures have indicated, we will try to understand from the point of view of the scriptures that what's the purpose of creation. Is there any purpose of creation, or is there no purpose? And if there is purpose, what's our role in it? So we will try to have an understanding on this theme in today's discussion. So first of all, I would like to just indicate that every day during our Aratrikam, the second, I won't say it's a song, it's a hymn written by Swami Vivekananda on Sri Ramakrishna. That's a very wonderful hymn written by Swami Vivekananda and Ramakrishna. But we won't go to the entire hymn. We will just indicate the first three syllables used before we start chanting that hymn. What is that? Om Rim Ritam. The first line is Om Rim Ritam Tvamachalo Gunajit Gunedya Naktang Divam Sakurunam Tavapada Padmam. So that's the way how it starts. So the first three syllable is Om Rim Ritam. Why Swami Vivekananda is using these three syllable at the beginning of the hymn? Because it actually speaks of the absolute reality and the creation. The entire thing has been described by these three syllables. Om, Rim, Ritam. what it means? Om speaks of the absolute reality, the undifferentiated reality, which is beyond all the phenomenon, which is beyond the mind and the senses. That absolute reality, which is undifferentiated, has been indicated by that undifferentiated sound Om. The word Om, you will find, is a sound. It is a sound which is produced where the tongue is not touching any part of your mouth. The unadulterated sound which starts in your vocal cord with the sound as if rolls out in the form of oo, and it ends when the lips touch each other with ma. So where the tongue is not touching anywhere when you're producing that sound. So what it speaks of, that this is the sound which we can produce, which is the least differentiated. This Om gets transformed into all the alphabets. When in the process of pronouncing Om, our tongue starts touching the various parts of the mouth, we get the other alphabets. Just see when you say that tongue is not touching any part of your mouth. But to say ka, immediately they will find that the middle of your tongue is touching the palate. And that sound gets converted into ka. It gets limited. So similar with all the alphabets. All the alphabets are actually a limited expression of that undifferentiated sound Om, Anahata Dhvani. The word Anahata Dhvani itself is something very significant. Anahata means the sound which is produced without any vibration, without any collision. Ahata means to collide. So when you're pronouncing Om, so no part of your tongue is colliding with any part of your mouth. So that's why it is anahata. So it's anahata. The sound which we are producing is something which represents the absolute reality. Why? Because yes, the entire creation, whatever I see, I am a limited expression of that absolute reality. You are a limited expression of that absolute reality, just like all the alphabets. But the absolute reality is beyond all these limitations. That's why it is represented as Om. So now, this Om, which represents the absolute reality, it finds expression as this phenomenal existence, as energy. Now it comes in the domain of science. Even in science, we'll say this world is nothing but energy. Matter is also energy, because we know that energy and matter is interconvertible. The famous equation of Einstein's proves that E is equal to mc square, where it speaks of the interconvertibility of the matter and energy, that everything at last reduces to matter, to energy. In science, they are in search of unified energy, where we find that energy finds expression in various ways, like gravitation, like electromagnetic force, strong nuclear force, weak nuclear force. In so many ways, it's finding expression. Is there one energy from which all the energy has evolved? The science is in search of that. RIM actually speaks of that unified energy from which the entire creation has evolved. That energy is something not separate from the absolute conscious principle, the undifferentiated conscious principle, the absolute reality, the Om. It is not something different. From that, it has emanated. And when this energy emanates from that absolute reality, from that conscious principle, it never emanates as a chaos. If there was chaos, there wouldn't have been any creation. Just take an atom bomb. It explodes, it destroys. We cannot think of any creation with that type of energy. But the same nuclear energy, when the explosion happens in a controlled way, in a controlled nuclear fission within the nuclear chamber, now it becomes constructive. I can use that energy for constructive purposes. So it has to be within some laws, within some regulations, restrictions. That's what we find, that the energy, when it is finding expression within certain rhythm, with certain laws, then only I can think of creation. So the science also has found that gravitation follows certain laws. Electromagnetism follows certain laws. Magnetism, all these photons follow certain laws. The science has discovered that. So these, all the energy which is finding expression as laws, as rhythm, is expressed as rhythm. The God, the absolute reality, finds expression as Shakti, and that Shakti is not chaotic. It finds expression as the wonderful universal laws. So that's how the entire creation emanates from the divine, is being indicated just by these three syllables. How wonderfully they have described Om, Rim, Rhythm. Now just we will take an example to understand this. These examples, we should not just think that it is a thing in itself. These are called upama. Certain aspects of it we take help of to understand what I am speaking of. Now, to understand that undifferentiated reality is so difficult. So let us take the example of a magnet to understand what it is speaking of. Now, just take an ordinary iron bar. There is no magnetism in it. So it is something like that undifferentiated absolute reality as per the magnetism is concerned. That magnet is hidden in the iron bar, but it is not manifested. It is not yet manifested. It is just hidden potentially. Now, if I can somehow, with the help of some external magnet or whatever it may be, I can align all the magnetic dipoles within that magnetic iron bar. All the magnetic dipoles are scattered. And that's why the magnetic field is zero. Each are negating each other. That's why as we actually contemplated on Brahman, that's why it's in the Vedic culture, in the Vedic civilization, the concept of zero evolved. Zero never means absence of anything. Zero means balance. Something negating the same thing. 4 minus 4 is 0. 2 minus 2 is 0. The same thing negating the same thing gives a balance. That is the zero. So the magnetism in an ordinary iron bar is zero because all the magnetic dipoles there are scattered. So the magnetic field of one is negating the other. So though the potential is a magnet, but its magnetic field is zero. So if somehow I can align all the magnetic dipoles in such a way that the north poles are all in one direction and the south poles are in another direction, immediately it becomes a magnet. I keep some iron filings near it, they're attracted. So now I feel the same. The thing which was appearing as undifferentiated, as per the magnetism. Here I won't take the consciousness. Just to understand that, yeah, just taking a parallel example, that the magnetism which was appearing as undifferentiated now gets differentiated. The moment it gets differentiated as energy, again we will find it is not chaotic. If I throw the iron filings around it, I will find that they are taking a particular pattern around that magnet. So this energy is following certain laws. That pattern speaks of those laws. So the same thing has been spoken of for the entire creation. The entire creation came out from that conscious principle. Its first manifestation as energy, as a Shakti. And that Shakti, again, is not chaotic. It is finding expression as laws, as rhythm. This, from the Sanskrit word rhythm, the word rhythm in English has came. Rhythm, that means the laws. That's the Satya. What speaks of the absolute reality? This law speaks of the absolute reality. These laws are the truth, which indicates, there's an indicator of that absolute reality. So this Om, Rim, Rhythm has been spoken of as the entire, which speaks of the God as well as his creation. Now, the big question comes, even in the magnet. I know that just we are taking this example to have a clear understanding. In the magnet, what happens? That when it was an ordinary iron bar, there was no magnetism visible. Now, the moment the dipoles get aligned in such a way that all the north poles are in one direction, the south pole is in another direction, it becomes a magnet. So I need some external agent to convert that iron bar into a magnet. Otherwise, that potential energy cannot become something manifested. So now the question comes, that absolute conscious principle, it was by itself perfect. It has no want, no desire, nothing. And now when it was finding expression as Shakti, how it got transformed from just as an ordinary iron bar by itself cannot get converted into a magnet. I need another magnet to make it magnet. How come the conscious principle is finding expression as Shakti? So now in the last class also we were indicating in Vedanta, in Advaitic Vedanta, in the Vedas, in the Upanishads, we will find the concept of Ajnana is coming. That yes, somehow the conscious principle is the same conscious principle which is finding expression as this universe. And the primordial matter of the universe is energy. So it is the energy which is actually consciousness itself. But how it happened? So we will find where the concept of Ajnana. The simple answer which the Vedas give, which the Upanishads give is, we don't know. It has happened. But how it has happened, we don't know. That's Ajnana, that's ignorance. To understand the common example, in our day-to-day life, it happens that when we are in deep sleep, suddenly we start dreaming. And the dream breaks. We wake up. And then I understand I was dreaming. Now, if someone asks exactly when you started dreaming, can we ever answer? Impossible. We can say when the dream ended. The moment the nightmare was over, I woke up, I saw the watch, I know the time. But can I ever say when the dream started? We don't know. That's why in Vedanta they say, Ajnana is anadi. When it started, we don't know. How it started, we don't know. But we are more interested about its ending. This nightmare can end. When the nightmare ends, what happens? That then I find that what all things I was seeing in the dream were mere, all hallucination, were all imaginations. They were not real. The real thing is me, the one who is awake, is the same thing, is the same person who just went to sleep. When I went to sleep, I'm the same person when I awake. What all I saw in the dream, those all were making up of my mind. So similarly, the Vedanta says, when the ignorance breaks, when I go back to my spiritual identity with my absolute reality, then suddenly I realize, oh, this all was dream. When it started, how it started, I don't know. But yes, it breaks. And now I find I have nothing to lose. I have nothing to suffer. I am the same person as I was. That absolute reality. All this was actually the making up of the cosmic mind. It breaks. So that's why the Vedic concept of Ajnana comes into picture when we have to describe that how that conscious principle has, it has never transformed, as if transformed into the Shakti. And that also again as the laws, the universal laws. But in the Bhagavad Gita, we find that as our spiritual science evolved, the Vedas, the Upanishads end up by saying that it is just Ajnana. But in the Bhagavad Gita, we find a wonderful concept is evolving. It is not just satisfied by saying it is ignorance. There we find the concept of Purushottama is developing. What it is saying that we will find the 18th sloka of the 15th chapter. What is being indicated? Yasmat ksharam atitoham Aksharat api chottama atosmi loke vedecha prathita purushottama. So there are two things in this universe that even in me, what I see is my body. Behind that, some conscious principle must be there to move this body. It is something inert. So akshara, akshara. That I am not this conglomerate of body, of this all these senses. Behind that apparently I feel there is a conscious principle. So this sloka says that both, here he is not denying that by saying that I am only the akshara, I am only that conscious principle. Both I am, but I transcend both of them. That in Upanishads we have the idea that absolute reality is the conscious principle, that undifferentiated principle, which how it has happened we don't know, is finding expression as the universe, as the projection, is projecting itself as the universe. But in Bhagavad Gita, the absolute reality has been indicated as the Purushottama, who transcends both, even that absolute reality which we speak of as Akshara. It transcends that. It transcends, of course, also the physical existence. He's the Purushottama beyond all that. Now, how to understand this, what it is speaking of? Sri Ramakrishna is giving a very nice example. A snake, just take a snake when it is lying inert. It has coiled itself and just lying inert. It is the same snake when it is crawling, it is moving. The same snake which was lying inert is now moving. This example Sri Ramakrishna is using to indicate Brahma and Shakti are identical. Brahma, Shakti, Abheda. So this, when the snake is coiled, lying inert, it appears as if dead. But is it dead? No. The conscious principle is undifferentiated there. But when it starts moving, then immediately find, oh, it was just lying inert. It is actually conscious. That's why it's moving. But is there any need for some external force to make that snake moving? No. The snake transcends both the Kshara and the Akshara. Just to understand this with the help of Ramakrishna's example, he is something which is transcending both. When we just limit our understanding by saying that I am the conscious principle, then even in our day-to-day life, we will find that the spirituality becomes just limited only to vichara, constantly just thinking I am Brahman. It really gets limited to meditation. The action factor as if has nothing to do with our life. Our spiritual life gets compartmentalized. That's why Bhagavad Gita is so important. It actually gives the philosophy which can encompass the entire of our life. In each and every activity, everywhere, we can find the expression of the divinity. When you are meditating, of course, you are as if trying to get identified with the Akshara, with that absolute reality, with that absolute conscious principle. When I am working, the Kshara, this universe is also the manifestation of the divine. I need not have to totally deny it. I only have to be conscious of the fact that the divine is finding expression here also. But when it is finding expression at Kshara, I should always remember it is finding expression through that rhythm. It has certain laws to which I also should abide, or else that will cause disintegration. So this is the idea. We can be conscious of the divine in both the states if we are always aware of that rhythm factor of this triad, Om, Reem, Rhythm. The absolute reality is finding expression as the triad of Om, Reem, Rhythm, of all the three. If we are aware, not only of the Om, of both all the three, then we can easily relate our life in such a way that each and every moment becomes a worship of the divine. Nothing remains secular. Everything becomes sacred. We did not have to have a watertight compartment between the secularism and the spiritual life. The spiritual and the secular are actually the obverse and reverse of the same coin. I can never segregate them into a watertight compartment. It's the limitation of the understanding which actually forces us to think that way. So the Sri Ramakrishna's, with that example, we understand how nicely that the absolute reality transcends both. Both are the aspects of that absolute reality. That absolute reality is the concept of the Purushottama. It's not just the Purusha, Purusha Uttama, who is something beyond the Purusha. This word Purushottama, what it means? That we generally define the entire creation has two aspects. That ultimately there is two things. As per the yoga, as per the Sankhya philosophy, that Purusha and the Prakriti constitutes the entire creation. Bhagavad Gita is speaking, no, something is beyond that. That Purusha and Prakriti, beyond the Purusha. And that is the Purushottama. This Purushottama has two aspects. Both the Purusha and the Prakriti are the aspects of that Purushottama. Once we know that, now the question comes that what is the nature of the rhythm? We told that the energy, the universal Shakti, finds expression as a rhythm. So what is the nature of that rhythm? Law. Any law, physical law, as well as all our moral laws, spiritual laws. Is there anything common? Yes, there is a common thing. Energy speaks of attraction, bonding, love, interaction. In this entire universe, that one universe that also this energy is finding expression in so many ways. But can in this universe anything lie totally segregated from the entire creation? Nothing. There's a constant interaction going on. Everything is interconnected. This rhythm speaks of this interconnectedness. That has been spoken of even in the Bhagavad Gita. The concept of yajna. Yajna, generally we think that Homa is a yajna. It's a very limited way of understanding. If you try to understand Homa as yajna, then we never understand this sloka in Gita. The 10th sloka of the 3rd chapter, what it is saying? Saha yajna praja srishtva purovacha prajapati. Many take it as literal yajna, literal Homa. And that's why that the Homa is a everyday feature of their life. That every day they have to do some fire sacrifice. There's orthodox, some traditions are there. But the yajna, we should not take that in such limited sense. Yajna actually doesn't mean fire sacrifice. It means, sorry, it means this interconnectedness. Then why we have limited that fire sacrifice with the yajna? So there is also an idea of interconnectedness, which we have limited. What's the idea of that interconnectedness there? In the Vedic world, in the Vedic culture, all the forces of nature were personified as the divinity. The god of rain is Indra, the god of wind is Varuna, and we know that nature can be, means it is the nature which sustains us, but it can at the same time destroy us. There can be flood, there can be storm. So these forces of nature has to be appeased. So how it can be appeased? So that's all how the Vedic civilization is developing. That when we light fire, we find that the flame moves upwards. All the natural forces there, all the forces are visible all upwards. Rain comes from the sky. Wind is just something which is in the atmosphere, in the sky. So all the natural forces are as if something not in our domain. It's something up high in the sky. They have to be appeased. How can I appease? I cannot reach there. The fire is something which moves upwards. If I offer anything in the fire, immediately I find it as in the flame, it moves upwards. So just see how the culture is developing. They developed the notion that to appease the devas who are in the swarga, in the higher domain, we have to offer them something. Now, what we can offer? With our limited understanding, what we like, the devas also should like. If the guest comes to your house, what will you do? The things which I like, with that only I will try to treat him, just with the idea, with the conviction that he must probably also like that. And that's what they're doing. All the things which there's the ultimate climax of the civilization, the pure ghee and other things. They're offering the fire, and the flames are moving up with the idea. There's all the personification of the divine, the Indra, the Varuna. They will be happy, and in turn, they will nurture us. There won't be flood, there won't be drought. We will have abundant cultivation. So here you find that yajna, here is interconnectedness. I'm trying to relate to that. I'm trying to give something to the divine so that they in return give me something. Now, Bhagavan Krishna in Gita is doing a wonderful thing. He's taking this idea, not the exact ritual, as the idea of the yajna, this interconnectedness. And now what he's saying, saha yajna praja srishtva. And this creation came into being, the rhythm which was followed, when the Brahman find expression as energy, that is taking the form of the creation, it is following certain law. What is that law? That law is the yajna. That everywhere, everything is interconnected. When in this Krishna, as a young boy, took some, that soil, that children, whatever they find, they take in. And the mother Yashoda, wanting to just bring out that lump of soil which Krishna has swallowed, is forcing his cheek, is just pressing his cheek to forcefully open the mouth. And what she sees the entire universe there in that small lump of clay. What actually speaks of, is it something mysterious? No. Actually, we don't have the eyes of Yashoda to see the exact reality. Wherever there is soil, know it for certain, something organic should be there. You go to the center of Australia, it's all red desert. No soil you find there. It's all sand, red sand. How the soil comes is a tree, the living beings die, decompose, and that's how, mix up with this sand, and gradually that gets transformed into soil. Wherever soil is, it speaks of life. Without life, there cannot be soil. So when you see a lump of clay, like Yashoda, if I had eyes, immediately I should have the capacity to see a tree there. The moment you can see a tree there, you are bound to see the sun there. Without sun, you cannot think of tree. You have to see the minerals which has nurtures that tree. Not a single mineral has been created on this earth. We are all stardust. From the stardust, all this mineral came. That's how the earth is rich in all the minerals. So the entire universe has to be seen in the single lump of clay. That's what's the idea of interconnectedness. And nothing lies segregated in this universe. Whether it is in the physical level, or in the intellectual level, or in spiritual level, we are all interconnected. So when he created the rhythm, what's the law behind this creation? Is a yajna. That we will understand this sloka. It's not just simply the homa which you are doing. Saha yajna praja srishtva. When I created this universe, I did it with that idea of yajna. Purovacha Prajapati, with the first creation, when Prajapati, the cosmic mind, came into existence, he's the Prajapati. First came the cosmic mind. From that, the entire creation came. So when I created that, I did it with the concept of yajna. Let the entire creation sustain itself with this yajna. Anena prasavishwadhyam esha o ishta kamadhuk. Let it become your kamadhuk, that it yield whatever you want. In this life, whatever you want, it will yield all the things, if we are doing with that awareness of that idea of yajna behind it. So this is the wonderful thing which we find in from the Bhagavad Gita. This idea is emanating. And with this idea, actually, the entire Karma Yoga is related. Karma Yoga, sometimes we think, is dispassionate action. I have nothing to do with the world. I am dispassionately. It speaks of like something like a psychopath. The psychopath also does everything without any emotion. You know why the emotion is created? That in our brain there is a center for emotion, which is constantly getting tagged up with the centers of perception. When you can all relate, when you first came to Australia, how lonely you used to feel, those who have migrated. Whenever we migrate to a new place, first we feel so lonely. And gradually we find our world there. You know what has happened? When we come, we cannot relate our emotion with what I have seen. Everything, the buildings, everything looks like that, whatever I have seen in the calendar. Gradually, when I start staying, my emotion starts getting linked. Oh, this is my house. This is my friend, my relatives. This amness, this mamatva, when this gets tagged up, then everything starts, gives a sense of reality, tangible reality to us. Without that, everything looks like something, just picture. So here also, what's the idea which we were speaking of, that here, that it is this our love, our emotions, that gives the sense of tangibility, of reality. With that, when we are relating to the world, then everything becomes something sweet. The duty becomes sweet because of that love behind it. And if we take karma yoga as just simply detached action, it is almost like a psychopath. It's never meant that. In Bhagavad Gita, we study properly. It's actually totally based on this idea of yajna. That once that ultimate reality finds expression as the universe, it's always interdependent. And that interdependence in the human beings finds expression through empathy, through love. And that love, if I don't make it selfish, that it is not I who am loving, is a God's plan, which is finding expression through this love, which is through which the entire creation is going. I am just the channel through which that love is flowing. Now, this detachment is something different. It is not the detachment of a psychopath. I am relating myself to some higher spiritual awareness, and then the dispassion which comes, that's what speaks of the real karma yoga. And then you will find nothing is left out. Constantly being aware of your divine origin, anything you can do, you can meditate, and even you can plunge into the world and do all your actions without being detached from your spiritual identity. So that's the thing. The Ajnana in the Upanishads, there is a difference between the idea of Ajnana in the Upanishads and in the Bhagavad Gita. In the Upanishads, the Ajnana means we do not know that how the perfect became imperfect, how the undifferentiated differentiated. But in Gita, the ignorance is the concept, is the ignorance about the concept of yajna. You will find in the 19th sloka of the 15th chapter, the same idea. Again, the idea has been extended that yo mam evam asangmura janati purushottama, the one who doesn't know me as the Purushottama, he is the one who is ignorant. But the one who knows me, by when the delusion goes, when he knows me as the Purushottama, then what happens? Sa sarvavit bhajati mam sarva bhavena bharata. It's very interesting, very important. He becomes sarvavit, he knows everything, and he starts worshipping me, not just by going to the shrine and just following certain rituals, following certain mantras, and limiting his spiritual practice to that only. But how? Sarva bhavena bharata. In all possible ways, whatever he is doing, it becomes a worship. Once he is aware of the idea of that Purushottama, the Purushottama who transcends both the Kshara and the Akshara, he, though that is that undifferentiated principle, it is the same undifferentiated principle which finds expression as this differentiated universe. And when it is finding expression, it is finding expression as the rhythm. And that rhythm speaks of nothing but yajna. One who is aware of that, immediately the entire life becomes spiritual. Nothing remains secular. So there's a difference between the idea of Ajnana in the Upanishads and in the Gita. So if we try to relate to the idea of the Ajnana in the Gita, it gives a much deeper sense, a much deeper meaning. So now question comes, does this yajna then expresses the cruel authoritative determination of the all-powerful being? That's the question with which we started our class today. That's the question which some of you are asked. That what happens? That the mother feels so much love for the child starts growing, and the mother finds that the child is getting more and more separated from the mother. And that's the cause of suffering. All other love is something different from the mother's love. In other loves, we find that is the two separate entity as if combines, and that gives the happiness. In mother's love is just the opposite. When the child was in the mother's womb, both were the same entity. Mother's food was the child's food. Mother's breath was the child's breath. There was no separate entity at all. It was born. It was totally dependent on the mother. Still, the same identity. They're sleeping together. They're waking up together. They're crying together. They're happy together. As long as the child is in the mother's lap, that's how it's going on. And then a time comes, after some time, we find the child is growing. It has started walking. It has started relating to the other world. It has friends. And the mother finds the child is now separating. It's the friends are becoming more important in the child's life. Grows up, his career, ambition. And now that suffering comes. That I cannot forget the child, but child easily forgets me. And that gives the suffering. And then the question comes, what's the plan of the universe then? Is this the way God has created? How cruel it is. So here actually, now that the discussion starts, that it's our wrong way of understanding. In the Upanishads, again and again it has been said that it is actually the suffering comes when I am wrongly identifying my identity with this limited self. If I take the entire thing as a whole, the entire picture, there is actually no cause of suffering. In the Upanishads, they say that from Ananda, Anandat Deva Khalvimani Bhutani Jayante, Anandena Jatani Jivanti, Anandam Prayante Vishanti. It is from that Ananda, the aspect of bliss. The absolute reality is Sat Chit Ananda. That Ananda is finding expression as the creation. In Bhakti Yoga lecture, Swami Vivekananda in one place is using this analogy. Just see a small child, it's always happy. And how that happiness finds expression? You'll find constantly it is playing with toys, not only toys. Even if you give a child some clay, it will immediately start building up so many models, so many things with that clay. It builds something he has prepared nicely and then it breaks it. Prepares again something different. That why this child is making, unmaking. It has no purpose. It is just the expression of the joy within. The child has no purpose as such. Though it has made a wonderful model, the next moment it will break, again make something else. It's the expression of the joy. He's as if playing with the thing, and that is finding expression as the game. And now, just to take this analogy and just take that the ultimate reality be as the Virata Shishu. Kavi Nazrul Islam has coined that, has used that word, Virata Shishu. He is that, that the cosmic child is playing with the universe. But someone asked Ramakrishna that he is playing, but we are dying. We are suffering. It may be his Leela for him, but we all die. And then immediately Ramakrishna replied, where are you? Everything is he. That's the thing. That's the catch. The moment we forget that we are actually one with the absolute reality, the moment we say that I am a separate identity, then the question of suffering comes. If we just take that it is he alone who is playing, where the question of suffering comes. So here that ignorance is the thing which causes the suffering. From that bliss, the world has come out. Why it has come out? When the child is in having that bliss, as an expression of the bliss, it needs something. It needs the toys to play with or something. The Lord was alone. As an expression of the joy, it needed something. So he was that that in the Upanishads they say that the Brahman was ekam eva advitiyam, and then he created this universe and entered into it. The tat srishtva tat eva anupravishat brahma evam idam agra asit. He alone was there. After that, he created and entered. Why? Because that it's an expression of the joy. He wants to play with his own creation. And that creation is not something apart from him. It came out from him and he's playing with it. And any game, how can you relate in that game? Through love. In this life, if the joy, the bliss can be experienced only through love. But I cannot love myself. I am alone. So I have created all the entities out of me, and through love, I can interact with them. It is only through love. So that's the plan. And the other entities are not separate. It is him. Then again, the question comes, if it is his plan to experience the love, then why he has created us in such a way that we forget? We forget the absolute reality. We forget the divine principle behind our existence, and we run towards the world. But again, this to understand, even in our scriptures, even in other scriptures also it is indicated the same thing, that for love again cannot be programmed. Suppose a robot has been programmed in such a way that it has unconditional love for you. Will you ever feel love for that robot? Never. You know it's a machine. It has been programmed to love you. You can never reciprocate that love. It's impossible. Love is only possible when you know the other being is also conscious. I love him, and he or she has the choice to reciprocate that love. It's not that if he's bound to love me, that cannot. It is just he becomes a slave. It's a machine. It cannot be love. He has the choice, and out of choice, that person reciprocates. Then only you experience that love. So that's why God has given this choice to us. Otherwise, he will never experience that love. He has given that choice that he may love, he may not love. And it is this choice which makes us go towards the world. But again, at the same time, the world has been planned in such a way. You can never get happiness out of it. You just simply has to exhaust. And then you have to return. And God is waiting for us eternally, that when we return, all this suffering, this ignorance is a plan of the universe, so that at last we return. There is no answer to it. Few days back, I was hearing a very nice answer that why we suffer in this world. Very nice answer. That this world is just meant for a teaching. It's a bridge to just connect us from this, to just enable us to transcend this worldly existence. It takes us from this worldly existence to the divine existence. So this life is just like a bridge. And why we suffer in this life? No one is supposed to build a house in the bridge, isn't it? Bridge is just to take you to cross over. But the problem is, out of ignorance, we start building our houses on the bridge. And that's why we suffer. The bridge is not meant to just stay. It's not there to build a house. And we start building house on the bridge. And that's why we suffer. So if we take the life in that way, that is a teaching. It is taking us through this phase of our existence to teach us something. Then the life becomes a joyous game where we are all co-passengers. We are all traveling at last to be one with that, our ultimate divine identity. We are all co-passengers. We are all having a joyous ride. So this is actually how the divine finding expression. It is a constant. The divine is never that we have an idea that a time was there when the creation was not there. Suddenly the Big Bang happened and then the creation came into existence. Even science have started denying that. That creation is something that it's not at a singular moment it has happened. It's constantly happening. Like a child, it is constantly to express its joy. This creation, dissolution, everything is going on eternally. It's not that the creation was not there at all and it suddenly came. out. So many big bangs are happening in the universe all the time. It's not only this one universe, which even in the science that they have started saying that there's all the theories are changing. These are all, that's why there are all these theories. But that's what is indicated in our scripture, that creation is something which is eternal and is an expression of the joy. And the plan is that in the joy, how to experience that joy? When we again relate back to the divine identity, for which the God is as if eternally waiting. That's why when we go to the temple, at last we find that that we imagine the divine. We start with the idea of the divine as something full of treasures. He's having 10 hands like Durga, there to protect me, bless me. And at last we end up with Gopala. No, there's no wealth. The small child, almost naked. There's nothing that he can give me. We find just when you just go to this image of Gopala, that instead of this putting his hand in this way as if bestowing us something, it's just the opposite. He's actually extending his hand as if he is wanting something. Just see how the idea of divinity has evolved. That the God is eternally waiting. It is he who is wanting. He's the beggar. He's eternally waiting for us to turn back so that he can experience the joy through love, for which actually the creation came into existence. If you see the creation, everywhere it is this interdependence through which in various levels he is experiencing that joy, that bliss which comes through love. A single cell, just take a single cell. When the life started as a single cell, it found that that why that single cell evolves, but something behind it is saying you're eternal. That conscious principle is saying it is eternal. But it finds as a small micro, I'm not eternal. Because it, out of ignorance, that echo which is hearing, he's misidentifying it with the micro body. The micro body will die with a little change of temperature, little change of weather conditions. So it finds that its life is so something very vulnerable. It's so vulnerable. But something behind it is saying you're eternal. And then how to experience that eternity? Yajna starts there itself. It starts conglomerating with other microbes. That's how life has evolved. They start staying in a cluster. They start there's a division of labor. That for me alone to do everything, that digestion, respiration, everything, I find it so difficult to cope up with the external forces of nature. Come, let us cooperate with each other. You do the breathing portion. I do the digestion. I do the thinking portion. So that's how at last as a human being we find that wonderful division of labor. The various parts of the body, various organs are specialized in particular work. Why this evolution has happened? Through this yajna it has happened. Through constant, it is not through fight. Through cooperation, we conglomerated at last. It was through love. We all sacrificed our little ego for that, for the greater ego. That entire body now finds expression as one identity, that I am the entire thing. Each and every cell is not fighting by saying, I am something separate from the body. They're all cooperating to give me this idea that I am a single individual. This, at last, it cannot go through eternity. At last, this same Ananda gets converted into the spiritual Ananda when one realizes, oh, the initial mistake has happened. What? I somehow, the consciousness, which is beyond all limitations, I limited it in the micro body. And then constantly I try to realize it through the body. It has evolved, but I can never realize the absolute through body. Because body is, however sophisticated it may be, it is limited. After all, I am already free. That's what is echoing through my body. Because of the misidentification, I have taken the reflection to be real. Why not I see my reality? And then what happens? The renunciation comes. That there is no need for this conglomeration. Now that spiritual union comes into picture. That enough of trying to unite with the physical existence. That also gave joy, but it was limited. Now that same joy is going to become something unbounded when I live off it, I live off that and turn my face and say, let me now become one with my Father. Let me become again one. So from the evolution starts from that absolute, it goes back to that absolute. It is actually a cyclic process. It's not an eternal straight line. We start from the perfect being, from that absolute, we again go back. And in the entire process, why it has been designed in such a way, at each and every state, we are experiencing that joy. At the beginning, as a micro body, it may be very less joy. That joy, the more we conglomerate, the more we fight with the nature, the more we stay as family, the more we stay as a united society, the joy factor goes on increasing. At last, when the total selfishness factor is gone, I'm not that it's, I'm just, when I say that we are trying to relate to the divine, means we don't relate to the world. We're relating to the world with the awareness that it is a God whose expression, who's to find joy, that who's to experience his own bliss, has created this universe, and at each and every step, he has actually designed that yajna there. Everywhere that interdependence is there. Why not relate to that? Let my body-mind complex go on for that, for fulfilling that purpose. But within my spirit, I always remain identified with the divine being, not with this body. Then the suffering will come. And that's how we can relate to the spiritual identity and gradually live off this yajna in the physical plane. And that becomes the culmination, the bliss experienced by the devotee, by relating to the divine, is the culmination of this entire journey. And that's how the journey again retraces back to from where it started. So this is the thing which we were trying to understand through the Karma Yoga which we are studying. That whenever we are saying that detached karma, the first mistake we do, just that the emotion factor has to be left out. No emotion. Just I am in this state. What can I do? I have to go through this thing. Let me do it totally with disinterest, without any love for anyone, with a hard-hearted way. What I have to do, and at last I will be one with the maker of my heaven. It's never going to happen that way. That's the wrong. Then now it's a wonderful balance between attachment and detachment. That's why in Bhagavad Gita, when he was speaking of, in the very second chapter of the Sthita Pragya, one of the qualities he told is anabhisneha. Means the Sthita Pragya doesn't have abhisneha. He never said he doesn't have sneha. Sneha is good. Abhisneha is bad. That I shouldn't be hard-hearted, but at the same time, I shouldn't be attached. That sneha is something like infatuation. The object of my love, when I find, is not reciprocating to me the way I want, suffering comes. That is infatuation. That is abhisneha. So Bhagavan Krishna is never saying that you should not have sneha. Sneha is good. Unabhisneha, that infatuation is something bad. What our love should be? That yes, the God has given me my child. It is he who wants to take care of his creation. That love he has implanted in my heart, it is his love. He grows. And when he is growing, he has his own ways. He is sanskara. If I want a mango tree, I have to plant a mango seed. From a mango seed, I cannot get a jackfruit plant. So each, because of his past, that when my child is not mine, he is having his own past. I was just a channel through which he found expression. Now he's growing. Now, as he grows, his past will find expression. If it is a jackfruit tree, it will become jackfruit. Just by watering, I cannot make it a mango tree. It will find its expression. And there I don't feel hurt. Now, let him have his own life. I have did my job, and there my work ends. And I am fulfilled that I did my job with full sincerity. Whatever I could have done, I have done. When I say that my child has not become as I wanted, it is actually something which speaks of my own selfish expectation. I wanted to make the mango tree a jackfruit tree. I had my own imaginations which I wanted to project there. And then the suffering comes. If I would have taken that way, that the nature is that each and every seed has to be nurtured, for that a gardener is required, I am just the gardener. I am the God's gardener. And after doing my job, I am happy that I have done in a proper way. As Swami Vivekananda in one of his lectures is saying, very interesting, it is actually a reflection of Ramakrishna's teaching, that a master has a garden, and there were two servants to look after the garden. One servant never used to do any work. Whenever the master is to visit the garden, immediately he will run and just touch his feet, lick his feet, and we just constantly praising him and moving along with him, saying, my master, my master. And the other one was a silent worker. He's the one who has actually tended the plants. The plants have grown, they are flowering, they are giving fruit. And then after saying this, the master, Sri Ramakrishna, asks, whom the master would love more? Is the one who was always constantly praying, my master, master, or the one who has tended his plants, knowing well that it is his master's garden? It's not his. It is not his own desire that he should grow a mango tree, jackfruit tree. Whatever the master has desired, that only he has planted. And now the plants came and the master is happy. And seeing the master happy, he is happy because he loves the master. And ultimately, he is not separate from the master. And it is to experience this love. This garden was actually built so that the joy can be experienced. So this is the idea, basic idea with which the entire Karma Yoga discussion is going on. So if we just try to relate that how with the concept of the Purushottama, the entire Gita has been explained, then the Karma Yoga becomes something which is actually mixed with our emotion. But that emotion is not ordinary emotion. It is the emotion which finds its identification with the Purushottama. It relates through love with the ultimate divine being who is beyond the Kshara and Akshara, and conducts his life in such a way that from outside he may look worldly, but internally he is extremely spiritually evolved. Spiritually, it's not something which has to be projected. As Sri Ramakrishna used to say, that সংসারী হবে, সংসারী সাজবে না, সাধু হবে, সাধু সংসারী সাজবে, সংসারী হবে না, সাধু হবে, সাধু সাজবে না. We do just the opposite. That's, he used to say that always, never become a householder. Just act as if you are a householder. And become a holy person, never act as a holy person. And we just do the opposite because of our wrong way of understanding of spirituality. So if we understand the spirituality from the Bhagavad Gita's Purushottama concept, this life becomes, entire life becomes a spiritual journey where not a single action remains secular. Everything becomes spiritual, everything becomes divine, knowing very well it is his universe where I, who am also not a separate thing from him, he has projected me, so that through me, he experiences the love, which is the aspect of his bliss, which has been spoken of as the Ladini Shakti in the Vaishnava scriptures. So with this, we can actually go on with this discussion to clarify, but yeah, we have to, as time is limited, we have to restrict ourselves. So I try to just understand that in the Karma Yoga, whenever we are speaking of that love, of which we are as if like a machine, that actually it's not a machine. It's something is relating to that higher purpose of life. So that's just to bring that idea home, we thought that why not just take a separate class to discuss on it. So with this, we conclude. And when we go through the remaining portion of the Karma Yoga, we will again and again try to relate to this idea, which we try to highlight in this class today. So thank you all. Namaskar. Just Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.